Welcome to Emotional Detox Podcast, where our mission is to get the world feeling again. Here is your host, author Sherianna Boyle.
Welcome, Sonja Jensen, to the Emotional Detox Podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's so great to see you.
Oh, it's great to see you too. So let me just tell my audience a little bit about you. Sonja is a naturopathic physician, and her mission is to change the way women understand their bodies and themselves. And she believes that women are the center of their families, their communities. And by supporting them, we create a ripple effect that will support the whole world. I love that. And so true, so true. Such an honorable statement. Her new book, everyone, is called it's called Woman Unleashed. Release your story, revive your hormones, and reclaim your freedom. So I hope everyone heard that. Woman Unleashed, release your story, revive your hormones, and reclaim your freedom. You can find Dr. Sonja at drsonjajensen.com. So great to have you here.
Oh, thank you.
I know we spoke recently in terms of the Emotional Detox Now Summit. So those of you that are listening, if you don't know already, we're having a big summit on Valentine's Day. It kicks off, and Dr. Sonja is a part of that, as well as your husband. So fascinating conversation there. So I hope that everyone goes to sheriannaboyle.com and you tune in for that. Today, we really wanted to focus on, I want to talk about this book, seriously, and hormones. I know we touched upon it with the summit. I'm not sure if we really dove in. This is particularly of interest to me because I think, looking back over the course of my life, and this must be like a broken record to you, that women don't realize how much their hormones impact their emotions.
Yeah.
And how they react to them. Because looking back now, I realize I was just hormonally a mess. Yeah. How did you discover this? How did you start to really focus on this area?
Yeah. So in my training as a naturopathic doctor, I started working with women right away, even in my third and fourth year clinical years. And the thing that I started to notice that although challenges manifested differently for every woman, the foundation was always similar. There was always some form of trauma or stress or something that's happened in their life, or the role that they've been playing, or a mask that they've been wearing that then contributed to their hormones responding to their life and their environment, which then changed their actions and just how they were feeling about life and the lens through which they were walking life with. So that really stirred in me this desire to want to understand that even more deeply, because I really felt like they were acting like a mirror for myself. So that took me down a self-discovery journey, which then brought me to this idea of understanding how intimate and intricate this hormonal system is and how responsive it is to our environment and our thoughts specifically. So as I started to do my own work, I started to really understand that connection, because I had PCOS, I had an inflamed uterus, I had all these things going on. And you do the right things, you eat the right diet, you do everything the way you want to do it because you're told that this is the solution, and not realizing that there's a whole other story that needs to be unveiled behind all of that.
So when you talk about the hormonal response, what do you mean? Can you talk more about what exactly is happening in women? I mean, I know that differs, that there's different case studies, but what do you mean when you talk about that?
Yeah, so just to identify the hormones, we have our stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, and then we have our sex hormones like estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, and DHEA. So these sex hormones that are secreted by our ovaries are the ones that are regulating our cycle. So for example, the first half of our cycle, estrogen and testosterone dominate a little bit more, whereas the last half, progesterone dominate. So the first half of a woman's cycle who's menstruating still, she's going to feel a little bit more energetic. She's going to feel like she can get a lot done, and just everything is more about the outward energy output. Whereas after ovulation, when progesterone takes over, that's our nurturing hormone. So that's the hormone that wants you to be more introverted, more reflective. So there's this whole rhythm that's happening throughout this cycle that many of us don't understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Interesting.
testosterone is the one for our libido, and that only shows up during ovulation. So there's this myth that we should have high libido throughout the entire month. But really, in reality, our physiology doesn't even allow for that to happen. So
Wow.
now there's many
Fascinating.
things, yeah, many things that will influence that cycle, what we eat, how we move, the thoughts that we're having, the toxins in our environment. They will influence how much estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone that we have. So if that gets manipulated, the moment there's, for example, if we're eating, we'll just take it down to basics of nutrition. Say
Mm.
we're eating non-organic food. The pesticides on that food mimic estrogen. So then the body can't tell the difference between that external input of estrogen and the intrinsic input that your body is trying to create. So now we have too much of it in our system, and progesterone doesn't get to shine in that last half of our cycle. So now there's anxiety. Now we're reacting to our partners when normally in that first half, whatever they said maybe didn't bother us, but now all of a sudden in the second half, we're feeling irritable and angry and just not wanting to be around them. So that really changes that response that the hormones are having, because the hormones are the communicators. They communicate from one cell to the next. So what they communicate is very much dependent on our environment. Again, how we eat, how we sleep, what we think, and all the various stories that we carry with us.
This is absolutely fascinating. And I don't know if other women are feeling like this out there, but I feel a little manipulated by marketing. Don't you? I mean,
Yeah. Oh,
I'm
absolutely.
feeling very
Yeah.
I am feeling manipulated, right? Because
Yeah.
we are told that we're supposed to want sex all the time, right?
Yep.
A good
Mm-hmm.
woman does. And what you're saying is we're just not designed that way. We're
No.
also, no one talks about this pesticide thing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's out there, but you have to dig for it,
That's
right?
right. Yeah.
And so then it leads to the anxiety, which we know is so high, and I would imagine depression is in there too.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So are you say our hormones are communicators? Huh. So what do you, a woman's listening to this and
Mm.
saying, okay, I get it. My hormones are communicating things that maybe I don't want, right?
Yeah.
So let's say the anxiety one since that's so
Yeah.
prevalent. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's imagine that somebody has an okay diet,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, Maybe not totally free of processed foods. What
Mm-hmm.
would you say to that person?
Yeah, so there's many different factors that will
Mm,
influence that progesterone. Stress is number one. So
mm,
progesterone converts into cortisol, which is our stress hormone. So the moment we have a stressful thought, the moment we're just moving through our day, it could be getting our kids ready for school, it could be being in traffic, it could be getting ready for a meeting. Any of those moments, if it's activating your cortisol, it's depleting your progesterone. Other
mm,
things that will influence it is the beauty products we use. The beauty industry is not regulated, so there are many hormone disruptors in
yeah,
those products that will also raise that estrogen and deplete the progesterone. So that's
mm,
the other method. So those are the two big ones,
mm,
besides food, which is probably the biggest one. So when you start to look at your home, when you start to look at what we're eating, when you start to look at the thoughts you're having and how you're responding to life and stress itself, you get
mm.
kind of an idea if you're in that state of depletion with progesterone, which then causes anxiety. So the way it does that is progesterone activates GABA in our brain, which is that neurotransmitter that helps just keep our nervous system really calm. So if
Mhm.
that activation isn't happening in that last half of our cycle, everything is going to feel bigger than it actually is. So the anxiety starts to rise. So
Mm,
investigating yourself is the first step. You know, doing the testing to look at where your hormones are at, looking
mm.
at your home, your habits to see, okay, what could be contributing to that dysfunction and what do I have control over and what don't I have control over?
I see. And so what I hear from women a lot is just a low energy, They
Mm-hmm.
don't feel like they have enough energy for everything that's on their plate or
Yeah.
everything they put on their plate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they are talking about, they're concerned about their weight, particularly
Yeah.
women that are now, their bodies are changing maybe after children, or even before. And so you're saying testing, you're
Mm-hmm.
saying looking at your habits in your home, what could be
Mm-hmm.
throwing your and beauty products. I'm thinking like hairsprays. I mean, I have three daughters,
Yeah.
and one of them, no offense to anybody here, but one of them gets those fake eyelashes put on. And every
Right.
time, I mean, yes, they look like Glamour Girl. I get it.
Mm.
But every time she walks in, well, it cracks me up because she'll walk in and I'll say, "Where are you going? Are you going out tonight?"
Right.
No, mom. No, mom. You
This
keep
is just
asking
me.
me. Right.
Yeah.
Because I keep thinking, oh, she's going somewhere fancy, right? Because you
Right.
look fancy
You
all
got
the
your
time.
lashes on.
Right,
Yeah.
but I can't imagine the glue. All I'm thinking about is the
Yeah.
glue, right? But
Yeah.
she's an adult, so it's her money, her time.
That's right.
But I'm thinking about, yeah, what is that doing when we pour
Yeah.
glue on our eyelids and all
Yeah.
this, lots of makeup's a thing now.
It is absolutely. And then even, beyond that to the cleaners that we're using. And when we look at different statistics of autoimmune and cancers, women are actually impacted more than men. And it really is because of these external toxicity that we
Mm,
have to deal with. So the way I would explain it to someone is like just seeing ourselves as a bucket, right? So we
mhm,
come into this world and there might be some things in our bucket, depending on our mom's health, mom's hormonal health, mom's stress levels. And then
mm,
as we're navigating life, we're kind of pouring more things in there. So whether that's like toxicity from our environment and pollution, or the things that we're eating, the makeup that we're wearing,
mhm,
the different choices that we have, but there's different pathways of elimination that help us empty that bucket. So
mhm.
that's our gut, that's our lymphatics, that's our lungs, that's the skin, that's all these things. But if those are inflamed, if they're not working well, then the bucket's getting full and full and fuller because there's clogs in there, right? So it
Right.
usually is that last drop in that bucket. Now all of a sudden it spills over. Now there's acne. Now there's
Yes.
mood swings. Now there's weight gain around the belly that doesn't go away because all of that accumulated toxicity has just been sitting there.
And what would you say are the sort of top things
Hmm.
that you would recommend that people consider?
Yeah.
Would you go to the cleaning products? Do you say get rid of the bleach? I mean, you must have been really biting your tongue during this pandemic with all these.
Oh
It must have been
yeah.
hard for you. I
It
mean,
was so hard.
it was hard for me thinking about my
Yeah.
daughter would come home, my youngest, and say, "Oh yeah, the teacher would spray the aerosol." Oh, and
Yeah.
I'm like, "Oh, now
Mhm.
my kid has all that in her." And what's worse, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know. You can't just open a window and
Yeah.
find an organic. So,
Yeah.
for those of us that are, choosing to educate us ourselves, and
Yeah.
that's what happens when you get educated, you almost
Yeah.
become kind of a spoiler.
I know. I know. You become that person at that party, right?
What does that
Yeah.
have in it?
Yeah,
You
yeah. Can I see
become
the ingredient list, please? Yeah. And that's okay. I think we have to learn to advocate
Yeah,
for ourselves because that might be
yes,
a teaching moment for somebody else that maybe
yeah,
just doesn't know. And if they know and they're choosing it, that's okay. That's their prerogative. But really
yeah, mm,
advocating for your own health and teaching our kids to do that is so
yes.
important. Like I sent my kids with like essential oils and different sprays and all the things because I'm like, this is happening. So we control what
Yeah,
we can control, right? So
yes,
that's my
yes,
number one tip is like look at
yeah,
what you can control and let go of all the other things. And
yeah,
if you can control how you respond to stress in life, if
mm,
you can start working on that piece, everything kind of dissolves away because then you're pausing more, you're understanding yourself better, you then want to do better. So then you go room by room, right? So I say
yeah,
start in the bathroom.
mm,
What's in your bathroom? What can you look at? Go to the website EWG, so the Environmentals Workers Group. It'll give
mhm,
you an idea of your toxicity levels, carcinogens, hormone disruptors in your products. There's an
mhm.
app called Think Dirty that you can download onto your phone. So you can really start
Ooh,
understanding, okay, what am I using every single day that could be detrimental to my hormones, and then slowly start replacing those things, and then move on into the kitchen, right? Because we could go really deep. I mean, what we're cooking with, like,
Sure.
there's so much, and that can feel very overwhelming. If
Yes.
you can bring in mindset practices, if you can start pausing, if you can start looking at your environment and just observing your life and your
Yes.
habits, that's the first step to taking that action step next.
I love that. And I find it is getting easier. I mean, I
Yeah.
was just in Marshall's the other day and I bought some big bottle of organic cleaner because sometimes you
Yeah.
go to the supermarket, you're like, do I or don't I? Do I want to save a couple bucks or do I go for the, what I've been using most of my
Right.
life? And
Yeah.
laundry detergent is a big one. I know we
Mm-hmm.
use the more natural detergent. My husband's always like, that doesn't do the job. I'm like, it does it
Right.
just fine.
Yeah, that's right.
You're
Just don't
you're
spill anything.
you're gonna be fine. It cleans the clothes, I
Yeah.
promise. Okay, it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have that heavy detergent kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
People will balk you, right?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
will. They'll have comments, right?
Yeah.
But it's so possible now. I love that, and I love the Think Dirty app. So what you're saying is, look at our homes. Is this what's in your book, Dr. Sonja, or are you? No. Okay.
No,
Let's.
it's
Yeah.
part of it, an element of bringing awareness. The book really is more about self-discovery. So
Okay.
it's that journey of self-discovery and understanding your hormones. So then you can make the choices that you need. So it's not necessarily a how-to book when it comes to toxicity and things like that, but it does
Mm,
bring awareness to the moment you're in your mother's womb, even your grandmother's, what things are happening and changing in your emotional body, your physical body, and how
mhm.
you then evolve and develop as a young girl, and then going through puberty and then beyond, all the way to menopause, and all the different influences in your life, especially the stories that we carry and the roles, the conditioning. You were talking about feeling
Yes.
manipulated. So that
Mhm.
conditioning that we get from our families, from our generations before, from the media of how we're supposed to look, how we're supposed to be, what does a successful woman look like and act like and behave like. So it's just going through all of those, and it gives you tools to self-discover and understand yourself and your hormones. So then you can tap into the solutions.
I love that. And the whole time you're describing what your book is about, and by the way, those of you listening, it's called Woman Unleashed: Release Your Story, Revive Your Hormones, and Reclaim Your Freedom. That's the title of her book. And I'm thinking about women's groups. I'm thinking about
Yeah.
women's book club. I mean, what a
Yeah.
great, I've never heard of a book kind of giving that angle before
Yeah.
in
Mm-hmm.
terms of how does it all begin? How does
Mm-hmm.
how does it develop? I absolutely love that, Sonia.
Yeah. Thank
And
you.
it's kind of a book that reminds me, if you were to do women's studies, like an
Mm-hmm.
assignment kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. Um,
Yeah.
and really have some good discussion about
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
that's how we're going to make change for women, really.
Oh,
We
absolutely.
have to read books like this together, and we have to have these discussions, and then we have to support each other because it can, otherwise you feel alone, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know it's interesting because I've been teaching yoga for 20 years now,
Mm.
and when I first started, literally there were family members that thought I joined a cult.
Yes, yes, I had the same experience when we started yoga, and I come from the background of yoga.
That's right. I know.
Right?
I know. I
Yeah,
know. You had the same experience?
I did. Yes, yeah. My brother-in-law, I guess, was looking up online and all doing all these things. I'm like, it's okay. This is
And
these are our roots.
right. And it
Yeah.
impacted my marriage because now
Mm,
they were his family, right? They all had this preconceived no their emotions about what I was doing. And he
right.
thought I was like losing my mind. He thought, I'm losing my
Mm,
wife. Who is she? She's going off.
mm.
She's not. He thought, oh, well, she must be very unhappy, right? Not
Oh,
realizing
yeah.
that this is just now he understands. But it's just fascinating. It's
Mm,
fascinating how yoga has transformed. I'm so grateful for
yeah.
that. Tell
Yeah.
the audience a little bit about your background because I find that
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, so I'm first generation Indo-Canadian, and so my background is in India, and I actually speak to that a lot in the book because I talk about cultural conditioning and
Mm,
some of the challenges that I had to face navigating two different cultures as I was growing up, and how the different things, the big T traumas and the micro traumas that I went through really influenced my life, my perception of myself, my self-worth, and how that played a role in my physiology. So I kind of move through my own story in the book, and then it just gives women this opportunity to be able to relate to their own story and the conditioning that they've received from their culture. And so with my yogic background, my Ayurvedic medicine background, naturopathic, I've also have yoga sets and meditations and these pause moments in every chapter where you get to pause, reflect on the chapter, and reflect on this exercise. So it varies from a yoga set, again, to a visualization, to a meditation, to an actual exercise where you're looking at your timeline of your hormones and your health, just to kind of give you these tools so that you can understand yourself better. And
mm,
so I really do share my journey of understanding myself and the conditioning that was ruling my life, and
mm,
how I dissolved that conditioning so I could really speak from my own soul's essence and not so much from the beliefs that were passed down to me.
mm.
So that's kind of the premise of my book and just how I brought my background into it.
So, what I hear you saying is that is part of the process of really
Mm-hmm.
becoming empowered is you have to take a look at, well, how did this all happen in terms of
Yes.
conditioning? How did I
Yeah.
get here? And it's kind of like, again, I'm going to use that word manipulation,
Mm.
wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Yeah. We
And
were taught these like
yeah,
truths, right?
mhm,
That
yeah.
really aren't. Yeah.
And so when you've been manipulated, you do go through a wake up period where it's almost like you want to revisit it and say, what
Mm.
exactly, how did I miss that? Right?
Yeah.
How did I
Yeah.
miss that? And what you're saying is, well, we were conditioned, so we didn't really miss anything because
Mm-hmm.
we've been conditioned all along, and those around us have been conditioned in different cultures. And so it's easy for everybody to kind of get under this that it's almost like having this I want to say glaze
Like a
or
veil. I call
being
it
like
the
a
veil.
the veil, that's right.
Yeah.
And so you're
Mm-hmm.
lifting the veil for
Yeah.
people. It would make sense that you have to dive in, everyone who's listening, right? There
Mm.
is a point where you have to. I just had an awareness yesterday. I was talking to
Mm.
someone about my mother and emotions and emotional suppression. And it was
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, a light bulb just went off. And that's why I know you have a podcast too, Ignited
Mm-hmm.
Health. Is that correct?
Health Ignited.
Oh,
Yes.
I had that backwards. That happens a
So
lot.
close.
Health Ignited podcast.
Mm.
I think it is important because you get those little light bulbs,
Yes.
right? When
Yeah.
you read something, when you tell your story, and when you write about it, when you listen
Mm-hmm.
to a podcast, all of a sudden, I can't tell you how many times I listen to a podcast. I have to pause it. Like,
Mm.
okay, pause that, hold that. I
Yeah.
need to digest what that person just said. I need to
Yeah.
take that. That was meant for me.
Yeah. And it's such a
Right?
reminder that it's a journey, right? So
Yeah.
we're always constantly going to have these aha moments as we're unraveling. And one thing that often happens for a lot of women or anyone that's, challenging their present identity is sometimes
Mm,
grief shows up.
mm,
Even with your experience with your husband, and as you went into this world of yoga, there's a letting go of a certain identity,
mhm.
and people around us get uncomfortable when somebody that
Yes.
they love is really challenging what they've been conditioned to be like or do. And so even within ourselves, there can be some internal battles, some grief, and these kind of shadow emotions show up to tell us and give us an opportunity of like, wow, this conditioning was so imprinted in my psyche and in my brain. My neurons are
Mm,
connected a certain way, and I'm unraveling that neuron now to create new connections that serve me instead of just doing what I'm supposed to do.
mm. Now you spoke, I want to circle back
Mm.
to the testing. You mentioned
Yeah.
hormonal testing. How do people get that done?
Yeah, so the best gold standard testing really is urine test, and there's a test called the Dutch test. So
Okay.
it tests all your markers. So depending on where you're at in your journey with your hormones, if you're a
Mhm.
woman that's menstruating, then you're going to be doing your testing on days 19 to 21 if you have a 28-day cycle. If you're in perimenopause, things are a bit irregular. Menopause, you're not having a cycle. So depending on who you're working with, so you want to work with a functional doctor that can order these tests for you.
Now, are you one of those people that they could contact?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's again, it's drsonjajensen.com if you want to contact her
Mhm.
office and explore that a little bit more. That's absolutely wonderful. I mean, this is so helpful. And really what I love about it is it isn't just saying you're not saying, okay, you got to eat better, you got to look at
Mm.
your environment. You're pulling in really the history, the whole
Yeah.
picture for women. And how do you, or what do you recommend in terms of how do we guide our daughters? How do we
Yeah.
guide the next generation in terms of hormones?
You start having the conversation young.
Yeah,
And one of the biggest things is my friend's daughter, she's 9 and she had her first period, which is quite young. And that's just the world we're in now because again,
yeah,
because of
that's so
environment.
true. Yes.
Yeah. So I made it a point to call her and talk to her about how powerful she is, and how this ability to bleed every month is her superpower, that your
Mhm.
hormones are your superpower. They are the gift that allow you to create life if you choose to. They are the gift that allow you to detoxify every single month.
Mhm.
This is a gift that's going to get you more and more in touch with yourself and with something bigger than yourself every single month, and all the women across the world. This is the thread that weaves us together. So
Mm,
by doing that, by planting that seed, that other signals that she's getting from media of like, hey, take this injection, take this pill, do this because it's so
right.
inconvenient. Oh gosh, that
Reduce. Oh,
pad.
I know.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's what
Yes.
she's going to hear in the outside world. So her
Right.
inner circle, her inner world, it's really important to empower that being
Mm,
a woman is really powerful because the conditioning for centuries now is that we have to
right.
hide this. We have to hide this aspect of ourselves because it makes others
Right.
uncomfortable. So the more we plant
So
that seed,
true.
I feel like
Yes.
it changes the dialogue around hormones. The more we educate on what hormones actually do, like I said, like that cycle of what
Mhm.
happens throughout the month, like, hey, you're having cramps, that's normal, you're probably low in magnesium, or you're not
Mm,
feeling well, you don't want to go anywhere, that's part of the story, it's okay. Grab a
mm,
blanket and a hot water bottle, this is your time to
mhm,
reflect and just be with yourself. So teaching them
mm.
that it's okay, that they don't have to hide, I think it's going to be key to changing how we relate to ourselves.
You're so right. It is the commercials,
Mm-hmm.
the marketing, everything is
Yeah.
about cover it up, keep it small, get the thinnest pad you
Thinnest.
can possibly get.
Exactly. Yes.
I look
Yeah.
at those things, compared to what we had when I was younger,
Mhm.
the big thick
With the
pad.
wings and
Yeah.
all. Yeah.
And now it's like this tiny, I'm like, how does that do anything? But that's what
Yeah.
they want. That's all that's
Yeah.
out there. It's kind of
Yeah.
like full size shirts. They're really hard to find right now,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, some companies are becoming creative, like Thinks and
Yeah.
even the Diva Cup. Like, just like it's
Oh,
really
yes.
about the relationship, right? So them
Okay.
understanding that
Yep.
it's not an inconvenience, but a gift.
A gift. I love
Yeah.
that. That sounds beautiful.
Mm.
Well, we could go on and on. This is such an important topic, and I hope that everybody enjoyed this. And I'll just say your book one more time: Woman Unleashed. Release your story, revive your hormones, reclaim your freedom. Thank you so much, Dr. Sonja Jensen, for coming on Emotional Detox.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about Cleansing Live with Sheriana, go to emotionaldetoxnow.com today.